So welcome to the Data Vault Friday. My name is Michael Olschimke. I'm the CEO of Scalefree. We run this session here every Friday to allow you, the audience, to ask questions about Data Vault 2.0, data-driven solutions, cloud computing, MPP, data cluster stuff, and so on. Yeah, you can use essentially any channel here. You can use the chat to raise questions. You can use the Q&A here in the client. You can raise your hand to raise a live question if you want. We used to that from the trainings. You can also use a form. I'll show you afterwards, after today's session, where you find the form essentially. And yeah, that's where you can type in your question, maybe upload some pictures, maybe some diagrams or something. If you receive multiple questions, we will be cherry picking. And it's typically time boxed, roughly 10 minutes for a good video recording. If there will be no questions at all, and we are getting to the summer break, I will talk about the cluster. Didn't make a lot of progress, so better ask questions. Otherwise, you see that it's not consuming just power, right? One system is working, but it's seen us. All right. So but we have one question still left. So let's see. Okay. So that's a question about essentially, I mean, on the face value, it's about dimension members, but it's all about how to hide dimension members which are not required anymore. And it boils essentially down to records from the source system that arrive every day. My understanding is it's not a full load, which is part of the problem here. It's not a full load. They only receive the new relationships, essentially. They say full refresh here, but only the new hierarchies. So they receive essentially data, relationships between regions, divisions, and so on from some source system, and they want to show the most current ones in the dimension, essentially. That's as far as I understand it. Now, they say that you could essentially, in the staging area, flag some records, count them or whatever, to mark the ones which are still active, and then remove them somehow from the dimension. And the last relation needs to be visible in the fact or in the dimension. Okay, so here's the thing. We don't flag anything in the staging area, right? So the first step is, we need to know which business keys or relationships still exist. And to capture these facts, we have two options. Either we use an effectivity satellite in the raw data vault that captures a deleted date or deleted flag, essentially. The problem is it works when you have either a full load from load to load. So you get all the business keys, all the relationships that exist in the source system. So based load by load, you can essentially identify those relationships, those business keys that doesn't exist anymore in your full load and staging. They apparently have been removed. They're deleted. So the trick is quite simple. If you have full loads, let's start with that. Let's start with the simple fact. If you have full loads, the trick is we typically we have the staging area with the full load, and then we create a view on top. In the view, I'm selecting all the records from the underlying stage table, and I set the deleted date to end of all times, because I know these records exist. And that means I mark them as not deleted by setting the deleted date to end of all times. And then I unionize another select statement. I'm selecting all the business keys from the hub or the relationships from the link where they are still active according to the effectivity satellite, but they don't exist anymore in the staging area. That subset, I'm just adding to the stage view, but setting the deleted date to the current load date timestamp when I recognize the deletion. And I also get the latest descriptions for the business key or the relationship from the satellites. And then add them also to the staging table. Don't add null values, because that would reflect a change, and you don't want to capture a change. It's a deleted record. That's it. The only change that happened is the change of the deleted date. That's it. Not the first and last name. It didn't change to null. You don't know what it is at the moment. So you have to assume the latest state that you have, and that's already in a target. And I don't want to insert a new delta into the descriptive satellites. I just want to modify the deleted date, and that's why I'm adding the latest descriptive data I have about the customers or whatever the business keys to the stage data as well, to this view. So I'm just changing the deleted date to the current load date timestamp when I recognize the deletion. And then I just treat the deletion date as a descriptive field. I separate that, split it off into its own satellite, the effectivity satellite, and that's more or less it. If it changes back and forth, who cares? I mean, the satellite will take care of it. That's the most easy approach. Well, even easier is if you receive data via CDC, because then you have an audit trail. You can just load these deleted records from the audit trail into your effectivity satellite, mark them well as deleted delta. So where you mark the deleted date with the current load date to indicate when the record was recognized to be deleted, essentially, based on the CDC data. And for inserts updates, you do the opposite. The problem is when you have increments, deltas, where you only receive the inserted and updated records, but not the deletes. Well, how should you know that the record got deleted? I don't know it. And you don't know either, because you don't have a wizard hat. That's what I'm always saying in training. So we don't know. Based on inserts and updates alone, you can't tell me that a record was deleted or not. You can make some assumptions. For example, you could assume that if a customer user did not log into the system for, let's say, 80 days, you assume the customer to be not deleted, inactive. That's what I could accept. Because you don't know if it's being deleted, you just assume this user is not active anymore. What you could do is, I mean, the facts you could receive is by using an alternative. That's the record source tracking satellite. The record source tracking satellite you could use to keep track of whenever a business key got delivered or not, and use that as a basis for this assumption, essentially. That might work. The other solution is that you receive a full load, but not of all the records from the source, all the user records with all the attributes, but only of the business key. Because the deletion detection is only done using the business key, the full load of the business keys. If the business key is missing in staging, I assume the record has been deleted. So I only need a full load of the business key column. That would be sufficient. I don't need the descriptive data. That's where I'm sufficient with inserts and updates. That's it. But those are the options. That's how we detect deletes in the first place in the raw data vault. To the best of our capabilities, essentially, of the source system, actually. And then these attributes now, the deleted date, for example, I personally would add them to the dimension for users or customers or whatever. The problem is, well, that's my opinion, right? So your business users might have a different opinion, but my opinion is, just because a user or customer got deleted, you can't remove them from a dimension model, because you still have facts that refer to the user. And if there's facts, you need to filter them down somehow. So in my opinion, I would just add a flag to the dimension, is deleted or deleted date or something. Just add that to the dimension and leave it for the business user to deal with it. What they do with deleted customers, essentially. That's out of my scope, essentially. So I wouldn't remove them per se from the dimension view by filtering down with the where condition or something. I would just add the attribute to the dimension and leave the rest for the business user. But now it's all done on the deletion date or deletion flag in the effectivity satellite. That's now a descriptive field you can use, and it can jump back and forth all the time, right? So in 4 weeks from now, the deleted user comes back again. The effectivity satellite doesn't care because the effectivity satellite will just capture the change on the deleted date. That's it. So that's the cool thing. Yeah, again, what you do with it, I don't know. That's up to the business user. I wouldn't filter out these dimension members. That's my opinion. All right. So that's the idea for the deletion detection and dimension filtering, essentially. There's one more question from Brian here. In large enterprises, is it a good practice to let departments to manage the data vault implementation from persistent staging area until information mart? They will work in their own data warehouse space. I'm not sure if this use case exists. Foreign keys between two tables in different raw vaults. Data engineers in different departments may need to access data from different, let me show it to you here, may need to access data from different raw vaults to build their own business vault. It's a good practice to allow this type of access rather than having sharing of data directly in information marts across departments. We see this with data, with data shares, essentially. So you could share your raw data vault on the raw data vault level, actually, or on the information mart level. I would distinguish here between sharing data, the raw data, and sharing information. If you share the information mart level, users will work with dimensions and facts, essentially, typically. But you could also, if you're a power user, you could also argue, well, the prepared information is not sufficient for me. I need access to the raw data. And the cool thing is, Data Vault is used to implement essentially a can be used to implement a highly distributed enterprise data warehouse, where different data owners build their own local solutions. But as long as you stick to the same standards, how you hash business keys, in the best case, how you model happening satellites, how you model certain patterns from the source system, naming convention, and so on, you can even seamlessly join these distributed data sets, actually, if you get access to the data from a security perspective, right? Could also separate that. And so we see this actually with a couple of clients, especially with the large installations. They typically have the choice between having a more centralized enterprise data warehouse, which is a bit easier to manage to some extent because you can enforce the standards a bit better, or distributing these enterprise data warehouse systems. We see distribution for different reasons. For example, because you want to build an enterprise data warehouse, let's say, for the general user population, another enterprise data warehouse for compliance, another one for HR, right? If you're sitting in HR, you can join the data sets from HR and from the general user population. If you're just an ordinary user, you only see the general enterprise data warehouse. If you're in compliance, you might see just the general enterprise data warehouse and your compliance data set, but the compliance data set is completely separated on a physical level. So different database, different network, completely separated essentially from the rest of the enterprise data warehouse. So that's what we see a lot actually in most clients these days, where they separate parts of the enterprise data warehouse for security reasons, organization reasons, legal reasons, that let's say some data might not cross your borders, so they have to remain in headquarters. And then some other data, typical example is, let's say, financial data about Swiss citizen or customers, where the Swiss financial data must remain in Switzerland. But if you're, let's say, you have a subsidiary in Switzerland, you can't share this data with your headquarters, but only on a highly aggregated level, for example. So there's no legal right when you can join these data sets essentially. There might be technical reasons why you separate these data sets. That, let's say, you have semi-structured data you want to keep in a MongoDB, you have more structured data you want to keep in a Snowflake database, and so on. Different databases essentially. Could be the reason. And then think about the data mesh. When you have essentially, when you move the production of data products, information products, both of them, when you move these productions into the departments, and I think that's coming from a data mesh, typically a question. Yeah, you could build these solutions locally at the department. What I would do is, in a data mesh, you would really want to focus on the process, not the tools. Some will use SQL Server, some will use Snowflake and Oracle and so on. Who cares? It's not about the technology. It's really about the standards and the process. To have a uniform, even a solution, essentially, overall solution, right? That's what I would focus on. Distribution works from a data vault perspective. And again, you can distribute on a data level, raw data vault, business vault, and on the information level, on the information marts. So that's what we see. Coming more and more due to the data mesh. And you can use data vault to implement a data mesh, essentially. Okay, cool. All right, good question. Thanks for that. So 2 questions in 1. Perfect, good session. Hope you enjoyed today. If you have a question like this, again, you can use the chat here, the Q&A. Oh, there's something new. Okay, cool. Use the form here if you want, https://sfr.ee/dvfriday. That's essentially a form where you can upload a question like this. And also, if you want a whiteboard photograph or team picture or whatever, everything will be published, right? And you can also check out our other webinars at scalefree.to/webinars. There's a webinar for Warescape and for DBT at the moment. So where our Scalefree consultants, the specialists on these tools, I'm not a big specialist in tools, talk about some patterns for these tools as well. They're on a monthly basis. Then a couple of announcements today. Let's talk. Remember the Data Dreamland coming up in October, on October 10 and 11 in Hanover, Germany. If you have a chance to come over, come over. Great to shake hands. And I think the speaker roster should be complete as far as I know. So that's also on the website already. Check it out on scalefree.com/ from the menu. I believe it's /Data Dreamland, but not 100% sure. And then one more announcement. We joined forces with Certus and essentially the Data Vault Innovators community check it out. It's a forum where you can essentially ask questions like the ones you ask here as well. We will move the content here also to the Data Vault Innovators community. It's coming up as well. So maybe some design changes to come up here in the slide work as well. Yeah, check it out. Register for it. It's free, all free. And yeah, hope to see you there as well. Cool. Thank you guys for joining. See you next weekend, next Friday, sorry. Have a nice weekend. See you next Friday. Enjoy the sun, at least. That's what we have here in Germany. Okay, thank you guys.
Thanks for joining today. If you'd like to discuss this further, give us a call on the number below here, and we're happy to discuss this with you. See you next time. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.